of all ages, races, religious beliefs, backgrounds, sexual orientations, gender identities, and abilities. We belong to the Unitarian Universalist Association of Congregations, and we are guided and inspired by its values and principles. Those values and principles move us to remember that we in Northampton inhabit unceded lands of the Pocumtuck and Nipmuc peoples. Our values and principles remind us to acknowledge our responsibility to face the legacies of dispossession and systemic racism that are part of our collective history, even as we affirm and celebrate the legacies that inspire us. Those values, we are here to support and celebrate one another and to renew ourselves with hope and gratitude and new resolve. It's wonderful to see you all both here in the Great Hall and to have you at home on Zoom. If you are new or returning after a time away, welcome. Please feel free to fill out a welcome card, which you can find in the offering plate here on the chancel or after the service. Doing that allows us to put you on our email contact list. For those of you online, there's a link to the card in the chat. Those of you here in person, thank you for wearing your masks. Please also check the distance between groups of people who came together. We ask everyone to keep your videos off during the greeting in order to help technology work as smoothly. We ask everyone to keep your videos off online except during the greeting in order to help the technology work as smoothly as possible. There will be a Zoom social hour as well after the service. And now we will begin our service.
You, darkness, of whom I am born. I love you more than the flame that limits the world to the circle it illumines and excludes all the rest. The dark embraces everything, shapes and shadows, creatures and me, people and nations just as they are. It lets me imagine a great presence stirring beside me. I believe in the night. Now, please rise in body or spirit and join in saying the words to accompany lighting our chalice. In times of darkness, we stumble towards the flame. In times of cold, we seek a warming fire. In times of joy, we light a candle of celebration. As this flame burns, may we find what we need today. Kurt Vonnegut once said that there are 6 seasons where we live, not 4. May and June are spring, July and August summer, September and October are fall, and next comes a season called locking, when nature shuts everything down. Winter is January and February, and March and April are the season of unlocking. Beth Jedziniak is the person who introduced me to this idea, the idea of the seasons of locking and unlocking. So we are in the season of locking, when the animals burrow down and most plants are or go dormant, when humans may feel like retreating into their own burrows, when it feels and is cold and dark. The days are getting shorter and shorter, and I suspect it feels colder and darker now than it will on that day in mid-January when we will have exactly the same amount of daylight as today. And I think that's probably because by then the days will be getting longer again, and it won't feel as dark as it is then. So once a year, someone actually asked me this morning, once a year we get an opportunity to have a late afternoon service when it's dark outside, or will be dark by the time we're done. And this is a benefit of the adjustment that we made about 10 years ago when the Hot Chocolate Run in downtown Northampton moved to a Sunday morning. It used to be on Saturdays. The run is a critical fundraiser for Safe Passage, which is the local agency that operates safe homes and provides services to victims of domestic violence. And it's an important fundraiser for them. So this afternoon, we'll devote ourselves to darkness, celebrate the season of locking and darkness through story and poetry and reflection. And I have a poem for everyone who's young or young at heart about darkness by Shel Silverstein. This one's called It's Dark in Here. I am writing these poems from inside a lion, and it's rather dark in here. So please excuse the handwriting, which may not be too clear. But this afternoon by the lion's cage, I'm afraid I got too near, and I'm writing these lines from inside a lion, and it's rather dark in here. And now Jessica has a less silly story.
Much less silly. It's about owling. I don't know if anybody's gone owling before, or maybe you're familiar with this book, which is my favorite Jane Yolen book. And I feel like it really helps to get in the mood of the wonderful things about winter, as opposed to some of the harder things about winter. It was late one winter night, long past my bedtime, when Pa and I went owling. There was no wind, the trees stood still as giant statues, and the moon was so bright the sky seemed to shine. Somewhere behind us, a train whistle blew, long and low, like a sad, sad song. I could hear it through the woolen cap Pa had pulled down over my ears. A farm dog answered the train, and then a second dog joined in. They sang out, trains and dogs, for a real long time. And when their voices faded away, it was as quiet as a dream. We walked on towards the woods, Pa and I. Our feet crunched over the crisp snow, and little gray footprints followed us. Pa made a long shadow, but mine was short and round. I had to run after him every now and then to keep up, and my short, round shadow bumped after me. But I never called out. If you go owling, you have to be quiet. That's what Pa always says. I'd been waiting to go owling with Pa for a long, long time. We reached the line of pine trees, black and pointy against the sky, and Pa held up his hand. I stopped right where I was and waited. He looked up, as if searching the stars, as if reading a map up there. The moon made his face into a silver mask. Then he called, and you're welcome to join me if you know the great horned owl sound. Hoo-hoo, 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 hoo-hoo. Again he called out, and then again. After each call, he was silent. And for a moment, we both listened. There was no answer. Pa shrugged, and I shrugged. I was not disappointed. My brothers all said sometimes there's an owl and sometimes there isn't. We walked on. I could feel the cold as if someone's icy hand was palm down on my back. And my nose and the tops of my cheeks felt cold and hot at the same time, but I never said a word. If you go owling, you have to be quiet and make your own heat. We went into the woods. The shadows were the blackest things I had ever seen. They stained the white snow. My mouth felt furry, for the scarf over it was wet and warm. I didn't ask what kinds of things hide behind black trees in the middle of the night. When you go owling, you have to be brave. Then we came to a clearing in the dark woods. The moon was high above us. It seemed to fit exactly over the center of the clearing, and the snow below it was whiter than the milk in a cereal bowl. I sighed, and Pa held up his hand at the sound. I put my mittens over the scarf, over my mouth, and listened hard. And then Pa called, hoo-hoo, 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 hoo-hoo. I listened and looked so hard my ears hurt and my eyes got cloudy with the cold. Pa raised his face to call out again, but before he could open his mouth, an echo came threading its way through the trees. Thank you. Pa almost smiled when he called back. Hoo-hoo, hoo-hoo, just as if he and the owl were talking about supper, or about the woods, or the moon, or the cold. I took my mitten off the scarf off my mouth, and I almost smiled too. The owl's call came closer from high up in the trees on the edge of the meadow. Nothing in the meadow moved. All of a sudden, an owl shadow, part of the big tree shadow, lifted off and flew right over us. We watched silently with heat in our mouths, the heat of all those words we had not spoken. The shadow hooted again. Pa turned his big flashlight and caught the owl, just as it was landing on a branch. For 1 minute, 3 minutes, maybe even 100 minutes, we stared at one another. Then the owl pumped its great wings and lifted off the branch like a shadow without sound. It flew back into the forest. "Time to go home," Pa said to me. I knew then I could talk. I could even laugh out loud. But I was a shadow as we walked home. When you go owling, you don't need words or warm or anything but hope. That's what Pa says, the kind of hope that flies on silent wings under a shining owl moon.
Now please rise in body or spirit and join in humming softly. And if you're home, you may sing full-throatedly to hymn number 83, Winds Be Still.
Winds be still, storm clouds pass and silence come. Peace grace this time with harmony. Fly, bird of hope, and shine, light of love, and in calm let all find tranquility. Bird fly high, lift our gaze toward distant view, help us to sense life's history. Fly high and far and lead us each to see how we move through the winds of eternity. Shine, shine in, illuminate our inward view, help us to see with clarity. Shine bright and true, so we may join our songs in new sounds that become full symphony.
Stop it. And now it's time for us to greet one another. If you are online, you might want to switch to gallery view. I'm going to do that here. Come on. Oh, we have to. Thank you. You can stop screen share now, and then we can see each other. Great. Lots of people are hiding today. But we can wave to everyone anyway. Yes, Kathy's going to turn the camera and wave to each other. And imagine the day when we don't have to do it this way anymore. It will happen one of these days. It will, it will, it will. If anyone has anything, hello everyone, says Lori, Zoom Tech, Zoom 1. I think Lori's learning how to be Zoom 1. She and Molly are Zooming together. Hi, Jan says, hi from the darkness of the woods where I'm hiking. Wow, I hope you get home soon, Jan. Okay, well, thank you all, thank you for sharing. And now, if you're online, you can turn off your videos again, just so the technology is, we can only blame ourselves for the glitches in the technology. And we will sing you out, everyone who's going to religious education activities, and Dave and Kit and I will sing you out.
Go now in peace, go now in peace. May the spirit of love surround you everywhere, everywhere you may go. Go now in peace, go now in peace. May the spirit of love surround you everywhere, everywhere you may go.
So this is a reading from a poem called The Day Is Done by Henry Wadsworth Longfellow, who's kind of the quintessential 19th century New England poet. Hello. The day is done and the darkness falls from the wings of night. As a feather is wafted downward from an eagle in his flight, I see the lights of the village gleam through the rain and the mist, and a feeling of sadness comes over me that my soul can't resist. A feeling of sadness and longing that's not akin to pain and resembles sorrow only as the mist resembles the rain. Come, read to me some poem, some simple and heartfelt lay that will soothe this restless feeling and banish the thoughts of day. Not from the grand old masters, not from the bards sublime, whose distant footsteps echo through the corridors of time. Read from a humbler poet, whose songs gushed from his heart, as showers from the clouds of summer or tears from the eyelids start. And then read from a treasured volume a poem of your choice, and lend to the rhyme of the poet the beauty of your voice. And the night shall be filled with music, and the cares that infest the day shall fold their tents like desert nomads, and as silently steal away. And now I think Kathy Brown has a social justice minute for us.
This is the Social Justice Minute, which calls us to bear witness to social justice issues in the environment. Every year since its inception, the youth group has been planning, shopping, cooking, and serving a meal for the Interfaith Shelter that runs from November 1st through the end of April. This year, due to COVID restrictions, the shelter will be housed at First Churches down the street in Northampton and will only serve about 25 women and men. And the congregation has generously supported our efforts by donating Stop and Shop cards or a check for shopping when we're desperately in need of this for next week when we start cooking. We only have $50 donated, and it generally takes about $110 to do the entire meal because we have to provide beverages, vegetables, a main dish, desserts for that amount of people. So we appreciate your support, and you can either get a card from Michael in the office and just have him leave it in Johnny, who's the youth director's mailbox, or you can write a check to USNF with youth shelter in the memo line. And we appreciate your support.
Thank you, Kathy. You can also, anybody who's here tonight, if you want to just, if you want to leave a check or money, you can just designate what it's for. That's another way to do it. Right, Kath? Yeah, okay. So our generosity, your generosity makes everything we do possible. And since the pandemic began, we've been devoting, for a while we were devoting 100% of our Sunday offerings to causes outside, organizations outside our walls. And since the beginning of last year, we've been donating 50% of everything that we collect for Sunday. We're sharing them between the work we do here and organizations in the community. And those are, as you can see on the screen, the Catholic Charities Greater Springfield Afghan Relief Fund, the First Nation Development Institute's COVID-19 Emergency Response Fund, Arise for Social Justice in Springfield, the Movement Voter Project, and the Movement Voter Project Foundation, and Embrace Race, which is a local, a program that's located in Amherst, but does educational activities around racial justice and is very successful across the country. So we will, again, we appreciate your generosity and your consistent contributions to our Sunday offerings. And now we are welcoming back Kit Johnson, who has played here several times before, and it's great to hear his artistry, and we will enjoy our offertory music. Now we'll have a change of mood. Our meditation is a poem called The Night Fairy by Keith Holyoake. Holyoake is a white Canadian researcher in cognitive psychology whose specialty is studying the role of analogies in people's thinking, which is an interesting thing for a poet to specialize in. He also translates Chinese poetry and is a published poet with several books in print. And I invite you to put yourself into his word painting in this poem. on a dock on a starless winter night, and we'll take a few minutes in silence afterwards. A starless night enfolds the open harbor. The wind plays its song with fir and cedar. Out in the fog, a whistle sounds 3 times. Beyond the dock, a slow murmur draws nearer. Suddenly, lights give shape to the shimmering ship, and snowflakes dissolve into ripples of endless water. The night ferry comes and stops to take me aboard, where I can sleep as I journey a little farther. I'm wondering if you painted a mind picture listening to that poem. Did you wonder, as I do, what kind of sleep the poet had in mind? I see a dark hulk and a dark shadow of a ship, and I have an image of being alone but not necessarily lonely. Darkness can suggest mystery or adventure. It can offer comfort or bring fear of unseen danger. And often it evokes desolation or sadness or grief. This is a poem called The Comfort of Darkness by Galway Kinnell. Kinnell was a white American poet who won the Pulitzer Prize for Poetry for his 1982 collection, his selected poems. And for 5 years, he was poet laureate for the state of Vermont. Kinnell was born in 1927 and he died in 2014. Darkness swept the earth in my dream. Cold crowded the streets with its wings. Cold talons pursued each river and stream into the mountains, found out their springs and drilled the dark world with ice. An enormous wreck of a bird closed on my heart in the darkness and sank into sleep as it shivered. Not even the heat of your blood, nor the pure light falling endlessly from you like rain, could stay in my memory there or comfort me then. Your bright hands into mine. So some of you know I once upon a time spent time as a hospice chaplain while I was in training for the ministry. And I worked in a home in Needham that is similar to the Fisher home here in Amherst. And someone I call Ruth was a patient with whom I spent a lot of time and came to know very well. And she needed to sleep with a light on, and she needed to keep her door open all the time, because darkness and being shut in just caused her to panic. She had nightmares about being closed up in the dark. And she died on a Friday night, right around this time of year, early December. Her grandson was a devout Orthodox Jew, and for him, and for Orthodox Jews in general, Sabbath is the day when the dead may not be moved. Now, the hospice residents had a policy that the funeral home had to take a body within 4 hours of a patient's death. But Ruth was special, not just to me, but to all of the staff. And so the house manager broke the rule. They closed her door and they let her body stay until the Sabbath was over. So it happened that I was doing a shift that Saturday. I didn't know she had died, but someone told me when I came in. And I opened the door to her room and went in. It was cold in there. The lights were off. It was dark. The curtains were closed. And I sat by the bed and I'm sure I said a prayer. But what I remember is that I had told her she was safe now, even in the dark. Nancy Schaefer was a UU minister and poet who was diagnosed with brain cancer in 2011, which was just a year or so after she had been ordained, and she died in 2013. And I'm going to read an excerpt, very short excerpt, from Remembering the Night, which was something published in a collection they called While There Is Still Night, Meditations from a Minister Facing Death, and this was actually her last poem. She wrote, "What to call this vast new thing, blackness, time and origin beginning again, how I love the dark. My altered sense of time and wakefulness is not annoyance, but welcome glee. Here is where the new begins." And now I invite you to rise in body or spirit, and we will hum or sing together hymn number 55, Dark of Winter.
Dark of winter, soft and still, your quiet calm surround Darkness soothe my weary eyes, that I may see more dearly. When my heart with sorrow cries, comfort and caress thee. And then my soul may hear a voice, a still small voice of love eternal. Darkness when my fears arise, let your peace flow through me.
Please be seated. So since the European age of exploration began, people with darker skins have faced indignities, suffering, great injustice in their encounters with light-skinned subjugators. Western European culture equates darkness with evil, danger, uncleanness, and death. And Black poets and other artists on all continents have worked with the irony that this presents them, reshaping and reclaiming and claiming their own darkness and the beauty in their darkness. So I have a couple poems. One is As I Grew Older by Langston Hughes. Hughes was born in Joplin, Missouri in 1901 and died in 1976. He was a poet, a social activist, a playwright, and one of the leaders, probably the most well-known leader of the Harlem Renaissance. So this is called As I Grew Older. It was a long time ago. I have almost forgotten my dream, but it was there then in front of me, bright like a sun, my dream. And then the wall rose slowly, slowly between me and my dream, rose until it's touched the sky, the wall, shadow. I am black. I lie down in the shadow. Into 1,000 lights of sun, into 1,000 whirling dreams of sun. Something happened to that poem, I apologize. County Cullen was also a Black poet and playwright, well known during the Harlem Renaissance. He was born in 1903 and died in 1946. And this is something he wrote. We shall not always plant while others reap the golden increment of bursting fruit, not always countenance abject and mute that lesser men should hold their brothers cheap. Not everlastingly while others sleep shall we beguile their limbs with mellow flute, not always bend to some more subtle brute. We were not made to eternally weep. The night whose sable breast relieves the stark white stars is no less lovely, being dark. And there are buds that cannot bloom at all in light, but crumple piteous and fall. So in the dark we hide the heart that bleeds, and wait, and tend our agonizing seeds. And finally, I have a brief excerpt of a poem by a UU minister whose name is Kristen Harper. She wrote a book that was published this year called The Darkness Divine, A Loving Challenge to My Faith. And she was the second Black woman to be called as a solo minister in a UU congregation. She has served the church in Barnstable, Massachusetts for the past 18 years. And this is a brief excerpt from Brave in the Dark. And you might hear echoes of County Cullen and Langston Hughes in her words here. Why must my heart break at the setting of the sun, when darkness comes with loving hands to draw me into sleep? Is not the blanket of the night as warm as morning rays. Without the glare of light, I can finally see, and in the dark, my tears can fall in relief. In the dark, my scars fade and I can sense healing. In the dark, I find freedom and can finally be brave. So what do you find? What do you feel? What do you learn in the dark? We can get hurt in the dark. If we weren't hurt already when we got there, it's easy to bump into something, to trip and fall, and maybe to lose the will or strength to get up. But when we enter a place that's dark and we stay long enough, our eyes begin to adjust. And gradually we are able to see more than we were able to see earlier. And find our way. Now, that ability fades with age, but it's still a lesson that I rediscover every summer when I'm in the woods. And most of the time, I'm not afraid of the dark. But I do know many people who are. For a few summers when I was a young adult, I worked at Camp Bonnie Brae out in East Otis, which is just west of here. That was the first time I spent any time in Western Massachusetts. There were girls for whom camp was their first time away from home, and girls for whom camp was their first time outside the city of Springfield or Westfield, and some of those kids were really afraid in the woods. They were afraid in the dark. There were 2 Black counselors who had more luck than anyone else helping those particular girls navigate their fears. And sometimes there was a child who just couldn't make the adjustment and ended up going home early. I worked with the oldest campers and then with the CITs, so I never had anyone who admitted to being afraid in the dark, but I did empathize with those little girls who felt forced to cope with the dark woods, who were too afraid to notice that their eyes could adjust, too afraid to learn to see in the dark, or to come to see its comfort and its beauty. And there is so much darkness in the world today that brings neither beauty nor comfort. This season of locking is in many ways a dark one across the entire earth, no matter how long the days may be in the southern hemisphere. In that darkness, you can name all the things in that darkness. The specter of a seemingly never-ending pandemic. In the darkness is climate change. In that darkness is the history and legacy of colonial exploitation and slavery and continued racial harm. In the darkness is discord and so many unknowns. In that darkness is the timeless truth that we and those we love are all mortal. And we can't give up and go home early. So our challenge is to resist letting fear turn to hatred and despair. Our challenge is to remember that our eyes do adjust, and to cultivate empathy for ourselves and for others, to have faith that we are not alone and that we can find our way. Our challenge is to choose gratitude and compassion and joy. And as I read in the beginning from Rilke, the dark embraces everything, shapes and shadows, creatures and me, people and nations just as they are. Tonight is the last night of Hanukkah, which is the night when the menorah is ablaze with all 9 candles. It is a season for embracing the dark and for shining all the light that we can. And in that spirit, please rise and body your spirit and join in singing or humming hymn number 226, People Look East.
The time is near of the crowning of the year. Make your face fair as you are able. Trim the hearth and set the table. People look east and sing today. Love the guest is on the way. Furrows be glad, the earth is bare. One more seed is planted there. Give up your strength, the seed to nourish, that in course the flower may flourish. People look east and sing today. Love the roses on the way. Stars keep the watch when night is dim. One more light the bowl shall brim, shining beyond the frosty weather. Bright as sun and moon together. People look east and sing today. Love the star is on the way.
Please be seated. May hope be in your hearts. May love guide you in the days and weeks ahead. Go in peace.